Joining us now is Pete Buttigieg. He previously served as the Transportation Secretary under President Biden. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us. Of course, I understand this is just one poll, an early poll about a contest that is still more than 2 years away. But what do you take away from it?
Well, thanks for having me on. And yeah, when I see these polls about an election cycle that hasn't even started yet, I just try to return my focus to what's going on right now. The 2026 November elections are hugely important. I think Americans are hungry for something different. Even people who generally prefer a Republican in the White House would like to see more balance. Somebody in Congress who can do something about the corruption, can do something about this Iran war that we're all paying for at the pump, do something about the cost of housing and health care. And I'm doing everything I can to make myself useful out on the trail for the people who are running at a moment when I'm not.
You and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez seem to represent very different parts of your Democratic Party, at least ideologically. What does it say about Democratic voters right now that the two of you appear to be neck and neck, in their eyes at least in New Hampshire?
Well, I think it shows that there are a lot of different ways to be a Democrat, and that's okay. We're not a command and control kind of party, but I think there are a lot of people, again, not just kind of card-carrying Democrats, but a lot of independents and quite a few people who normally vote Republican who are looking for big change. They're looking for something very different than this pattern of tax cuts for the wealthy and healthcare cuts for the rest of us. And I also think that there's a competition of ideas right now to show what we're going to do to change the system that we're dealing with. It's not just the individual policies that are hurting Americans, the tariffs, the Iran war, the healthcare cuts. It's the system that makes that possible, that makes it possible for you to have government be so out of touch. Now, you know, in a way, I think this president came to power promising that he was going to change the system. He certainly broke a lot of things, but I don't think most people feel like the system is much better. I think in my own party, there's a lot of competition for ideas about what'll make a difference, but also a lot of unity. When I think about something like getting money out of politics, you know, I was in Montana, obviously a more conservative state, where I saw Democrats, Republicans, and independents coming together to put a ballot initiative out that will do something about this relentless flow of corporate dark money into our campaigns. It's just one example of something that shouldn't have to be viewed as a left or right kind of thing, but does represent serious reform that's got to happen sooner rather than later.
You recently urged Iowa Democrats to connect with party outsiders in the lead up to November's midterm elections. When you've been out there on the campaign trail, do voters view you as an outsider? Is your service in the Biden administration seen as an asset or a political liability?
Well, obviously, I entered national politics as an outsider, a voice from Indiana, the mayor of the fourth largest city in the state of Indiana, trying to make a case about how our entire country could be different. When I did go to Washington, I'm proud of the work that I was able to do, especially on protecting airline passengers and building infrastructure across America. But frankly, also, my 4 years trying to get something done at the federal level deepened my belief that there needs to be massive change in how our federal and national institutions work. And it's made me even more convinced and committed to the idea that we cannot return to some previous status quo. I know there's a temptation for many Democrats to imagine, okay, what we've got to do is take power, change the way things are going, and reverse the damage and put things back. But anything that has the word back in it, anything that has the prefix re at the beginning of it, is something I'm very skeptical of, because the truth is the old status quo wasn't working either. I believed that when I ran for president in order to shake things up, and I experienced that when I had my opportunity to serve in the government.
You're now a resident of the battleground state of Michigan, where, of course, there's a very contentious Democratic primary underway between moderate Haley Stevens and progressive Abdul El-Sayed. Let's watch what the Republican candidate, Mike Rogers, said about the Democrats in a call with supporters. Listen to this.
And so what we're trying to do is let them go after each other while we're building this team up over the summer. Okay. That's why door-to-door has been so important. And by the way, if he wins, I think we're in good shape. I mean, I think he's so radical. I think he's going to lose, big parts of the west part of the state. We think we can do well in part of the southeast part of the state. I think we'll do well if he, in fact, is the nominee.
I know, Secretary, you've represented working class voters before. Is Rogers' assessment that we just heard about Abdul El Sayed correct?
Well, I think that Mike Rogers' comments reflect why it's very important for us to have a unified party coming after a primary that's pretty late. But beyond the kind of political tactics of it all, what I would say is that Mike Rogers is running on a platform of continuing what we've got with President Trump, which is increasingly and deeply unpopular in Michigan. He would be a rubber stamp for the Iran war that's causing us all to pay more at the pump. He'd be a rubber stamp for these cuts to health care that have hurt across the country, but they've certainly hurt a lot of people like my neighbors in Michigan. And he'd be a rubber stamp for these tax cuts for the wealthy that working families in Michigan just can't understand why we're being told, you know, we, as a country, that we can't afford nice things like good health care, good schools, at the same moment when there are enormous tax cuts being lavished on the biggest corporations and the wealthiest individuals in the country. Mike Rogers stands for all of that. That's why he got beat last time he runs for Senate, and that's why I think he'll get beat this time as well. I'm going to do my part as a Democrat active in the public scene and, of course, as a resident of Michigan to help make sure that we defeat Mike Rogers.
So do you actually plan to endorse in the Michigan Democratic Senate primary? And if you do endorse, who is your choice?
I think the most constructive role I can play is to make sure that we all pull together. Look, this is a very spirited and intense primary. It's also a primary between supporters who believe very strongly that the direction that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump want us to go in is the wrong direction, that we can do much better for that. Again, Michigan's primary is one of the latest in the country, so it'll only give us a few weeks to pull together, but I'm going to do my part to help us pull together during those weeks leading to the general election in November.
Another potential 2028 presidential candidate, Rahm Emanuel, has just written an article in the Wall Street Journal entitled "The Bernie Bros Could Spoil Democrats' Midterms." And I'm quoting him now. The DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, and others are saddling the Democratic Party with nominees whose wildly unpopular positions will protect Republicans from having to pay the price of Donald Trump's corruption and economic incompetence. End quote. Do you agree with Rahm Emanuel?
Yeah, I think those of us who are more moderate in the party should concentrate our efforts on talking about what we're for. Just like the Democratic Party as a whole has to be about more than just being against Republicans. Folks within the party who have a strong point of view have to be about more than just being against other people inside the same party that we might disagree with on certain things. We need to be clear what we will do that will make a difference, how we can set up health care that everybody can afford, so you don't have this situation that's happening now where people are choosing between a mortgage payment and a health insurance premium. And that's before the worst of the Trump Medicaid cuts go into effect next year. They were, of course, cleverly timed to come after the midterm elections. We've got to be clear about how we will make sure that the wealthiest people and the biggest corporations pay their fair share in taxes and do it in a way that we can still have economic growth, but we have a little bit more fairness and the ability to do things together as a country. We've got to be talking about the political reforms that we are for, starting with getting money out of politics, including a constitutional amendment if that's what it takes. This is the kind of agenda that I think can be unifying, and I'm much more interested in that than any kind of factional project inside or outside the Democratic Party.
Let's turn to the war with Iran right now. You're a military veteran. You deployed to Afghanistan back in 2014. How would you advise Democrats to speak about the conflict and the Trump administration's handling of this war with Iran when making the case to voters?
Well, a lot of voters believed President Trump when he promised to keep us out of wars like this and have seen with their own eyes what's happening now. That represents an opening for us to engage those voters who maybe haven't given us a hearing in a while. An opening is not the same thing as an answer. We got to explain what we're setting out to do. But I think it's very clear to most voters, to most Americans, we are worse off because of this war. And it's led to a string of broken promises that the president can't explain away. First of all, his promise he wouldn't get us into a war like this in the first place. Then the promise that he was going to achieve regime change and unconditional surrender, obviously not what's happening. And then the promise that this would be over in a few weeks. And this denial about the war is especially shocking when you look at the disrespect that has been shown to those who are paying the heaviest price for it. The fact that the Trump administration deleted references to 4 American service members killed in action because that simple and tragic reality complicates their narrative that we're somehow not at war when everybody knows that we are, shows you just how far from reality they are, and I think voters are fed up with it.
Bottom line, are you thinking of running for president in 2028?
I'm totally focused on 2026. The future, who knows exactly what the future will hold, but I know how to make myself useful right now, and that's getting out around the country, including especially in more conservative areas, pounding the ground, making the case for candidates I believe in, causes I believe in, and I'll keep doing that through November.
Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, as usual, thanks so much for joining us.